Hi again. The book we're discussing today, it concerns the protection of Paul Bremer, who was the provisional governor of Iraq, appointed by the United States. And obviously, it's a highly, highly sensitive and a highly, highly dangerous position to take following the invasion. Frank Gallagher, who wrote the book, had previously worked for Paul Bremer in the State Department protection, and was recruited by Blackwater, the company that held a contract from the American government to protect the provisional governor. So Frank, who had a military background in the US Marines, was given some range work in North Carolina, the Blackwater facility, then went off to Baghdad, takes over the team from the protection was being done by the Army's counterintelligence command, and they weren't too happy. But the Secret Service had done a survey and had recommended that the protection be done a different way. Anyway, he sent guys over, and they form a team and start putting the procedures into practice. Now, Blackwater is a controversial name. In books and movies, it's quite often portrayed as being a load of contractors willing to do anything for money, really shady stuff, killers operating domestically within the US, killing people and so on. This is all fiction, obviously. The reality was that it was contracted by various aspects of the government, the State Department or the CIA or the military, to provide specific services. Now, the founder of Blackwater, Eric Prince, has himself written a book, and he explains that a lot of the stories that were published in the media, he wasn't allowed to respond to and give their side of it because they were contractually forbidden to talk to the press by the different bodies they were protecting. So it was only years later he was able to explain and dismiss a lot of the things. On the other hand, there's a lot of failings within Blackwater. One failing is the contracts were stupidly short. Frank Gallagher's contract had to be renewed numerous times because it was only a 3-month contract or a month's contract at a time, which for a long-term contract like that, you want the continuity. They would send guys over and promise them leadership positions within the detail, which Frank Gallagher wasn't willing to give them because he had his own experienced leaders, and until you'd worked on the ground for a bit, obviously you shouldn't be a leader. It was a unique team facing a unique challenge, and the SOPs and the TTPs had to reflect that, which could only be done really after quite a lengthy familiarity process. Also, some of the guys that were sent over turned out to be absolute idiots. Weapons handling, magazines falling off weapons in front of other teams or military and things like this. And just goes to show that even if a guy's got a decent background on paper, there should be some vetting and some training going on. The other problem, or another problem, was that other Blackwater details who were looking after other entities within Iraq had the idea that they were all in one fight and they should share resources. And because the Bremer detail had the top resources, they were always being asked to send guys or equipment. And what these guys didn't realize, that the contracts were separate. You were working for different organizations, and you couldn't just divert manpower or resources or equipment to someone else's contract. And this came to a head really when they got a helicopter unit, and for the Bremer detail, and they were the AH6s, the little birds, which proved invaluable. But then other details wanted to borrow them and use them, and obviously they were allotted to a specific detail. But then that brought problems because the guy who they'd recruited to run the helicopter detail, who was a fairly, I think, a colonel, didn't like taking orders from somebody who'd been an NCO. And there was a lot of friction there, and that was eventually resolved when he left. So that was the kind of problems that Frank Gallagher faced, besides the problem of protecting the guy who the Secret Service had rated as the biggest target in the world. And the book goes into all of this. It's an absolutely absorbing read of the dangers of operating with the guy who was the target of so many different factions in Iraq, but who nevertheless was an absolute workaholic and attended numerous meetings all over the city and all over Iraq. In fact, he went to other parts, sometimes traveling by road and sometimes by air, but always in dangerous circumstances. Just a random generic violence in the city with the background violence and the bombs and so on was bad enough, but he was specifically targeted, very high profile. And the detail protected him successfully, never lost a guy, and never killed anyone. So from that point of view, it's one of the most successful protection operations ever run. Great book, and hats off to Frank Gallagher for the job he did, where sometimes he was working against the machinations of the Blackwater Company. It wasn't Eric Prince who really was off. He was doing other things. It was the office guys back in North Carolina who were causing a lot of other problems. And if you're building up a collection of books on close protection, this really is one to get.